Tina, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Well, I'm glad to be here, Russ, and I appreciate the invitation to be able to share with you about the New Mexico Downwinders.
Before we get started about the pending federal legislation about the Downwinders, take us back to July 1945. What happened to the communities of Tularosa and Mescalero Apache during the Trinity test?
Well, first of all, we have to remember that in 1945, people didn't have access to televisions or radios or telephones, and there was very little communication. So most people have said to me that they were asleep, they were literally knocked out of bed by the blast, and experienced a light like no other they'd ever seen before, because the test actually produced more light and more heat than the sun. So you can imagine what that experience was like for them. And people were frightened. They thought it was the end of the world. They gathered together as families, and some told me we prayed the rosary. People wondered what had happened. Obviously, they didn't know what they had experienced, but the most salient point is that the bomb produced massive fallout that basically went in every direction and became part of the environment forevermore. And so people's lives were forever changed. Their environment and their lives were invaded by the fallout that was produced from the Trinity test.
And what kind of stories did the elders tell you about the Trinity test when they went to go visit? Because they didn't know what had happened, and you could still walk to the site days afterwards to see what went on. What did they tell you?
Oh my gosh, I've had some really amazing stories shared with me about that. I mean, there was a time, like you said, that they allowed people to freely go out there unencumbered. So people went out there and picnicked. They took children on field trips and fed them out there. I've had people tell me, members of my own family, we packed our pockets with Trinitite. We ate lunch out there and then we went home. I have a dear friend in Tularosa who said that her parents and her aunt and uncle went out there. Her aunt was pregnant at the time, and when the baby was born, the dear child was born without eyes. So there was such a lack of concern for human health that they didn't even close the site to visitors. And I understand that into the 50s there was still unfettered access to the site, a radioactive site. I mean, when you go out there today, there's signs everywhere warning about the dangers. And imagine what the dangers were, you know, in the months and years just after the test. And allowing people to take things out of there. It's against the law now, and there's signs that warn against that today. But imagine back then, people took things. I had another lady contact me that said, my father went out there in the days afterwards, and he salvaged a bunch of steel, and he built a swing set for us, and he brought back what looked like parachute material. And my mom used it to make curtains for our home and christening dresses for the children in our family. And she said everybody's been sick and dying ever since.
The federal government at the time has always maintained that the wind blew the radioactive material away from communities where people were living, where your family grew up. But people would later say, yes, but there were small clouds of fumes that came back. What kind of stories did folks tell you that they went outside and experienced ash on homes and clothes and so forth?
Well, that's the oral histories that have been recorded by us throughout these many years, 16 years that we've been working on this. People have told me those stories over and over, and they're too similar to be untrue. And so what people say is that they experienced an ash that fell from the sky for days afterwards, which is probably very likely. The government didn't even have people in place for 24 hours monitoring what happened with the fallout. So for example, in the community of Carrizozo, the day of the blast, the Geiger counters went off the charts. That's very well documented. It's the only town that we have true documentation that the government has provided. And the Geiger counters went off the charts, and they called the men who were there physically monitoring the fallout off and said, you have to get out of there, it's dangerous. And so we don't know whatever happened in Tularosa or Socorro or Alamogordo or Ruidoso. But we can rely on people's memories of that day, and people have told me that ash fell from the sky, it got on everything, and people were living very organic lives. They were depending on the rainwater, collection of rainwater for drinking and cooking purposes. They were using the water out of the acequias or the ditch systems. Tularosa has the largest ditch system in New Mexico, and people were relying on that water, and it was now fully contaminated. To say nothing of the fact that we also didn't have grocery stores because no one had refrigeration. We had ice boxes. And so people couldn't keep things refrigerated like we do now, and you couldn't go to a grocery store and buy meat, produce, or dairy. Everything that you ate was produced at your own home by, using your own means. And of course, all of that was now contaminated. It was July when our cisterns would have been filling up with water because it was the monsoon season. And it was the height of the harvest when women would have been canning and drying everything they could get, out of their gardens for the upcoming winter. And so truly, we were maximally exposed to radiation as a result of the type of test at Trinity and the fact that we lived these very organic lifestyles, entirely dependent on the earth, the environment for our well-being.
Then the rare cancers came. When did residents realize or understand that they were suffering from different forms of cancer that were unusual and not the cancer seen in other parts of New Mexico?
Well, people literally started getting sick about 10 years after the test. Within that first 10 years, we started to see people dying from cancer at a time when no one had ever heard the word cancer in their communities. A good example is what happened in my own family. I'm the fourth generation in my family to have cancer since 1945. The two great-grandfathers that I had living in Tularosa, alive at the time, both got stomach cancer in 1955, almost at the very same time, what they called stomach cancer, at a time when no one even knew what that meant. And there was no treatment for them. They sent them home on morphine, and they suffered a great deal before they finally passed away. And so there's a latency period associated with exposure to radiation, and then when you manifest disease. But people started to realize that there was something wrong because we were seeing so much sickness and so much death. And, it wasn't until much later on that people started connecting the dots. And honestly, there was very little known about this until we started our organization, the Tularosa Basin Downwinders Consortium, or TBDC for short. There was really no organized effort to bring attention to the negative health effects suffered by the people of New Mexico as a result of Trinity till we started doing our work. And now, so many people have come forward. I receive information from people all over the United States because people have left and moved off their places. I received a health survey this week in the mail from Georgia, and the woman wanted to document her husband's cancer and death. He was a man who lived, his early years in Carrizozo and landed up suffering the consequences of that. And I think another thing too that I cannot mistelling everyone about is that we had casualties from Trinity, and it's documented now, and they were our babies. After a 10-year decline in infant mortality in the state of New Mexico because of the advent of antibiotics and better hygienic practices, we went from something like 33 babies per 1,000 dying in New Mexico, and in the months right after Trinity, the months of August, September, October, November, December, we saw these huge spikes in infant mortality, and we went to something like 100 babies per 1,000. And these babies were dying from a dysentery-like syndrome. And a healthcare worker contacted the Manhattan District Project and said, do you all know of anything that we might be able to do or something that may be causing this? Because everything we're doing is not working. And the Manhattan District Project decided to deny and deflect and absolutely lie about it, and our babies died. Our babies died that year. And that is like the most heartbreaking part of the story for me, and something that I think is unconscionable.
When you started bringing this to your attention to elected officials, what was the initial reaction that New Mexico folks, residents of the Trinity test, should be included in the Radiation Compensation Act? Because right now they're not. What was the reaction you got from elected officials? Were they engaged, or did they ignore you at first?
So RECA, the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, is a 31-year-old program that has paid $2.5 billion in claims to downwinders of the Nevada test site. New Mexico is also downwind of the Nevada test site, very well documented. When they went to Nevada and started the testing, they put monitoring sites all over the West, and there were monitoring sites in New Mexico. Those monitoring sites did show that we received radiation here through the summer of 1962. But the compensation ends at the New Mexico-Arizona border, as if I always say there's a lead curtain there that somehow has offered us protection to the radiation that we were regularly receiving from the Nevada test site. When we were first alerted to this and we started meeting with our elected officials, it was really interesting because there was this sort of almost as if they didn't know or didn't understand that people here had been damaged. But I have asked the question over and over, why were we not included in RECA in 1990 when it was conceived, when it was first enacted as a bill in the United States Congress? And I've had a variety of different answers. No one was looking out for you. Lately I've been saying, but we had 2 senators like all the other states that are included. No one was looking out for you. And now the regular answer we receive is adding you is going to cost too much, which adds incredible insult to injury when you think about the sacrifice and the suffering that the people of New Mexico have been through for 76 years, essentially, for 76 years. And so, we're not interested in hearing excuses any longer. If people decide, elected officials decide to remain complacent, knowing this story now, knowing what we've uncovered, if people decide to remain complacent in that, that makes them complicit in perpetuating a lie, because the government has always controlled the messaging. They said then, and they say now, that the area was remote and uninhabited, but we know that that is not true. We now have a map that actually says, that at 50 miles, for example, there were 14,000 people living, men, women, and children living adjacent to the test site. That is not remote and uninhabited. At 150 miles, there's close to 500,000 people living there at the time. And so, everyone knows the difference between right and wrong, and this is a social justice issue. It's about correcting a mistake. It was maybe not planned to be the mistake that it was, but there was health consequences, and the government did know some things in advance. They knew there would be fallout, and they knew that radiation was dangerous to human health. So the idea that they didn't know people would be harmed is absolutely not true.
Was it possible racial that you guys weren't included because the testing site of folks affected were Hispanic and Native American? Could that have also been a factor?
Well, it begs the question. You have to ask that question. The preponderance of people who were affected in New Mexico are people of color. Native Americans, Mexicanos, people who have lived here for hundreds, if not thousands of years. The preponderance of people who have received compensation through RECA are not that. And so it begs the question. I mean, I always wonder if that's not the reason that New Mexico is a sacrifice zone. We have the cradle to grave process taking place here. They open up the earth and take out the uranium. We develop and test nuclear weapons here, and then they bury the waste here. We're under consideration now for a high-level waste repository, and the people most affected by this have always been people of color. The uranium miners are, members of the Navajo Nation, Laguna and Acoma Pueblo. Those people were harmed greatly. There are 500 abandoned uranium mines. They took 32 million tons of uranium out of the earth and basically abandoned the mines, and people live adjacent to these mine sites. So you have to ask the question, how much does environmental racism play in the idea that the people who were so horribly harmed in New Mexico have been left to deal with it on their own?
In the last 30 seconds, how hopeful are you that this Radiation Act will get amended and extended and include people of New Mexico?
I am very hopeful right now because for the first time ever, we have members of Congress from other states who are greatly interested in this because their constituents for the first time will not be able to apply to the fund either. So extending it is going to have to take place for them. And that brings new people to the table to support the amendments to RECA and new people supporting the idea that we should be added as well.
Tina, thank you so much.
Thank you.